My name is Gerald Marsh. I am 61 years old and I live in a 2-bedroom house on the east side of Denver, Colorado, on a street where the neighbors still wave from their porches. I am not a man who speaks loudly. I am not a man who throws his weight around at family dinners. I worked for 3 decades at a commercial plumbing company, waking at 5 every morning, driving a rust-patched truck through Colorado winters, doing work that no one wanted to do but everyone needed done. My wife, Patricia, passed from ovarian cancer 11 years ago. She died before she could see our son, Caleb, graduate from medical school. That was the moment I realized the cruelest trick life plays. It takes the people who deserved the reward before the reward ever arrives. I raised Caleb alone from the age of 14. I cooked terrible spaghetti on Tuesday nights. I helped him study biology at the kitchen table until both of us fell asleep in our chairs. I drove him to every exam, every college interview, every clinical rotation. When he graduated from the University of Colorado School of Medicine, I sat in that auditorium and cried so hard a woman behind me put her hand on my shoulder without knowing me at all. I thought that was the proudest moment of my life. I was wrong. The proudest moment was supposed to come later. Except it never did. Because by then, Madison had arrived. And Madison had very specific ideas about who belonged in her world. If you have ever been made to feel worthless by the very people you bled for, this story will reach places inside you that you forgot existed. Subscribe before this ends, because the final 5 minutes will leave you breathless. Madison Holt married my son Caleb 3 years before the clinic opened. She came from Scottsdale, Arizona. Her father was a retired orthopedic surgeon and her mother had chaired university boards and charity galas for 2 decades. Madison was sharp, beautiful, and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had never once been told no. I tried. I genuinely tried with her. I brought a fruit basket the first Thanksgiving. I offered to help with the security deposit on their first apartment in Cherry Creek. I sat through dinners where she directed all conversation toward people she considered interesting, which was never me. Caleb noticed none of this. He was working brutal residency hours at St. Joseph Hospital, surviving on vending machine coffee and 4 hours of sleep. When you are that exhausted, you stop registering the smaller cruelties happening in the same room. So I stayed quiet. I told myself she was stressed. I told myself she was adjusting. I told myself that some people simply take longer to warm up. The day Caleb announced that he and Madison were opening their own sports medicine clinic in the Highlands neighborhood, I felt a surge of pride so physical it nearly made me dizzy. All those years, all those sacrifices. My boy was building something real. I asked Madison when the opening celebration was scheduled. She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as careful and said, very pleasantly, that they had actually celebrated the evening before. Just for their colleagues. Just for people with medical degrees. Just for people who owned a diploma. She said it exactly like that. Owned a diploma. I did not respond immediately. I have learned over 61 years that silence in those first moments is the only dignified response to something that has just gutted you. I said I understood. I drove home. I sat in my driveway for 22 minutes before I went inside. My neighbor across the street, a retired teacher named Bernard, waved from his porch. I waved back. I went inside and I sat at the same kitchen table where Caleb and I had studied biology together, and I looked at the empty chair across from me for a long time. Madison had not made an error. She had made a choice. There is a Specific kind of humiliation reserved for parents. It is the humiliation of realizing your child has allowed someone to redefine your worth. That Caleb had let this happen, had perhaps not known, perhaps not cared enough to know, was the part that truly cost me. The clinic opened on a Thursday. In early October, I saw photographs on social media posted by one of Caleb's colleagues. The waiting room had pendant lighting and white oak floors. There were flowers I could not name and food I could not identify on the photographs. My son was in a dark blazer, smiling that smile I had watched develop from a gap-toothed 6-year-old to a physician. Madison stood beside him, radiant and perfectly composed. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Then I made a decision. Not a dramatic decision. Not a revenge decision. I simply made a financial decision. I called my attorney, a quiet man named Franklin Doyle in Lakewood, and I told him I needed to update some paperwork. Here is something Madison never knew, because Caleb had never told her, because I had never told Caleb the full scope of it. When Patricia was dying, her parents, quiet farmers from eastern Nebraska, had placed a sum of money into a trust in my name. Patricia's father had sold 40 acres of inherited land 2 months before his own death, and he had done it specifically to ensure I would be protected. The trust contained $412,000. I had never touched it. I had worked my plumbing job and lived on that income because the trust felt like something sacred. Something Patricia-shaped still existing in the world. But I had told Caleb, years earlier, that if he ever needed capital for a major medical venture, I would find a way to help. He had mentioned it to Madison in passing. Madison had remembered. What Caleb did not understand, what he had never asked about, never followed up on, was that the trust was solely in my name. It was mine. Every dollar. No co-signer. No obligation. No promise in writing. Just a conversation at a dinner table 2 years earlier, where I said I would try to help. I called Franklin and I told him I wanted to restructure the trust distribution to exclude any financial assistance toward Caleb's clinic. Not punitive. Just accurate. The clinic was thriving. It did not need me. Madison had made that clear. I had her words, and they were enough. Franklin drafted the updated documents within 4 days. I signed them on a Wednesday morning. Exactly 1 week later, my phone rang at 8:45 in the morning. It was Madison. She did not open with pleasantries. She said the words quickly and with an urgency I had never heard from her before. The bank is calling, Gerald. Did you transfer the money yet? Caleb is waiting on the expansion funds. I sat very still in my armchair. Outside, a blue jay landed on the fence post I had painted white 3 summers ago. I watched it for a moment. Then I said, in a completely even voice, "Didn't I tell you?" There was a pause on the line. Madison said, "Tell me." "What?" I said, "I told Caleb. When he called last month about the 2nd floor expansion, I told him the funds weren't available anymore." This was true. I had told Caleb. Briefly. On a phone call that Caleb had taken while apparently distracted because he had said, "Okay, talk later," and hung up within 40 seconds. I had assumed he told Madison. He had not. Madison's voice shifted. The pleasantness collapsed entirely. She said, "What do you mean not available?" "You told him you would help. He planned the entire expansion budget around that." I said I understood that, and I was sorry for the disruption to their schedule. She asked where the money had gone. I told her it was my money, it was in a private trust, and I had made a different decision about its use. She asked what decision. I said I had decided to donate a portion to the Patricia Marsh Memorial Fund at Children's Hospital, Colorado. The rest I was keeping for my own retirement security. The line was very quiet for several seconds. Madison did not accept my answer gracefully. She called back 3 more times that afternoon. By the 4th call, she had stopped filtering her language entirely. She told me I was being vindictive. She told me I was punishing Caleb for things that were not his fault. She said I was using money as a weapon against my own family. I let her speak. I did not raise my voice once. After she finished, I told her that Caleb was more than welcome to call me himself and talk through anything he needed to discuss. He called that evening at 9:15. He sounded tired and genuinely confused. He said, "Dad, what happened? Madison is really upset." I told him to sit down. I told him that I needed to describe a conversation I had with his wife approximately 3 weeks earlier. I told him word for word what Madison had said to me about the clinic celebration, the diploma comment, the gathering for educated people. Every word, in the exact order she had said it. Caleb was quiet for a very long time. Then he said he didn't know about that. I told him I believed him. I said my problem was never that he missed the event. My problem was what his wife said, and that he had been so absent from the daily reality of my relationship with Madison that he had no idea what she was doing. Caleb said nothing for almost 30 seconds. Then he said, "Dad, I'm really sorry." I told him thank you. I told him an apology was a starting place, not a destination. I told him I loved him without condition. I also told him the trust money was no longer part of any discussion about the clinic's finances. That boundary was permanent. What happened next I did not expect. Caleb came to my house on a Saturday, without Madison. He brought coffee from the bakery on Colfax that I have loved for 20 years, the place with the green awning. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one, the biology table, and he was quiet for a long time. Before he started talking, he told me things about his marriage I had not known. He said Madison had been managing his professional relationship since before they were married. She had decided which colleagues were worth cultivating, which friendships were professionally useful, which family members reflected well on them. He said he had gone along with most of it because the strategy had worked. The clinic was successful. Their social network was genuinely useful. He said he had stopped noticing the cost of the strategy because success had muffled everything else. I did not attack Madison. While he spoke, I asked him one question. I asked him if he thought his mother, Patricia, would have been invited to the clinic opening. He looked at his coffee cup for a long time. He said he didn't know. I said that was the answer. Not that she wouldn't have been invited. That he didn't know. That her presence would have been a question that required calculation. I told him that the moment your mother becomes a variable in a social equation, something has gone deeply wrong. Caleb put his face in his hands. He sat like that for almost a minute. He looked up and his eyes were red. He said, "I've been an idiot, Dad." I said, "You've been absent. That's fixable. Idiot is just a temporary condition." He laughed. Barely, through something that was almost a cry. The clinic expansion hit a serious financial obstacle. Without the capital injection they had anticipated, Caleb and Madison were forced to renegotiate with their contractor and delay the second floor build-out by 7 months. Madison blamed me directly and did not hide it from their social circle. Word traveled, the way word always travels in tight professional communities, and some of it reached me filtered through Caleb's colleague, a kind radiologist named Dr. Priya Anand, who had met me twice at hospital charity events and thought I deserved to know. Madison had apparently described me, in a dinner conversation with 4 couples present, as a difficult and uneducated man who had sabotaged his son's business out of personal jealousy. That word, uneducated, again. It had become her preferred blade. What she did not know was that Dr. Priya Anand had a long memory and a strong sense of fairness. Priya quietly documented the conversation, including the names of the people present, and sent me a detailed message through Caleb's clinic email address, which Caleb forwarded to me without comment. Franklin Doyle reviewed the message and confirmed that Madison's statements, made publicly to identifiable witnesses, met the threshold for defamation of character in Colorado. I did not file a lawsuit immediately. I had Franklin draft a formal legal notice, sent to Madison at the clinic address, outlining the specific statements, the witnesses, and the legal exposure she now carried. The notice arrived on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Caleb had called me 4 times. Madison had called once, at 11 in the evening, and her voice when I answered was unrecognizable from the composed woman I had always known. Madison's call at 11 that night lasted 47 minutes. I recorded it on my phone, having been advised by Franklin that Colorado is a one-party consent state and I was fully within my rights to do so. She began with demands. She moved through justifications. She landed, somewhere around the 30-minute mark, in something approaching honesty. She told me she had always felt threatened by my closeness with Caleb. She said that the way Caleb spoke about me, about the kitchen table and the study sessions and the drives to exams, made her feel like she could never compete with a history she had not been part of. She said her response to that feeling had been to make herself essential and to make me irrelevant. She said it without pleasure. She said it the way people say things when they have finally run out of the energy required to maintain a lie. I listened to all of it. When she was finished, I told her I appreciated her honesty. I told her that understanding why someone hurts you does not erase the hurt. I told her the legal notice would remain unless she was willing to retract the statements to the same people who had heard them. She agreed. She made 3 phone calls the following week, in Caleb's presence, retracting her characterization of me to each couple. It was imperfect. It was not nearly enough. But it was visible. And visibility matters when someone has spent years making you invisible. Caleb filed for marital counseling the following Monday. The counselor, a blunt woman named Dr. Renata Cole in Capitol Hill, told them in the first session that their marriage had been built on a foundation of social performance. She said that plainly, with both of them present, and neither of them argued. 14 months after the clinic opening I missed, I stood in that same waiting room with the pendant lighting and the white oak floors. Caleb had invited me for the official 1-year anniversary gathering. He introduced me to every person in that room. He said, without any prompting, without any script, that I was the reason the clinic existed. He said that the man who drove him to every exam and cooked him Tuesday spaghetti and fell asleep at the biology table deserved to stand in this room more than anyone else present. 3 people applauded. I looked at the white oak floor and did not cry, though it was close. Madison stood near the window. She did not speak to me warmly and I did not expect her to. But she nodded when our eyes met, and there was no blade in it this time. Caleb and Madison remained in counseling for 11 months. Their marriage survived, changed, and held together by 2 people who had agreed to try. Whether it will hold permanently is not something I can predict. I do not hold the trust money over anyone. The Patricia Marsh Memorial Fund at Children's Hospital Colorado receives annual distributions. Caleb's photo hangs in the hospital hallway near the fund display. Patricia would have loved that more than any clinic opening. I am 61 years old. I live in my house on the east side of Denver. My neighbor Bernard still waves from his porch. I still cook spaghetti on Tuesday nights, alone now, but not because no one loves me. Sometimes Caleb drives over on a Tuesday evening without calling ahead and sits in the chair across from me at the biology table. We eat together. We do not talk about Madison or money or diplomas. We talk about his patients, about the blue jays on the fence post, about the green awning bakery on Colfax. That is enough. That has always been enough. And the woman who thought a diploma separated the worthy from the unworthy learned, at considerable cost, that the man without one had been holding the foundation.